and young. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Joe will not be here today.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone. We have a fairly, I don't want to say full because it doesn't look like it's a large meeting, but this will be a state board meeting where there will be a tremendous amount of information regarding turnaround school operators, those types of things. I'm going to make my comments totally off the topic of the state board agenda today and do some recognitions of some folks who are not here and thank them for what I would consider to be duty or actions above and beyond the call of duty. If you've been out of the state or out of the country since Friday, you probably, I think even out of the state wouldn't help you. You obviously heard of the tragedy that hit one of our school districts in southern Indiana. I had the opportunity to travel to Henryville Sunday evening and spend Sunday evening and all day, most of the day yesterday, with their superintendent and administrative team. I would share with you that there is not a picture you've seen on TV or the newspaper that truly captures the level of devastation and carnage that school community has incurred. It would literally tear your heart out to see what was a school and where students were sitting, have things like cars sitting in classrooms, entire portions of a building destroyed. I would first like to recognize the superintendent of that district. Monty Schneider, besides the fact that he's a longtime friend and colleague in southern Indiana, I think, one of the things that we see in every school's mission statement is a comment that we will provide a safe environment. It's literally in every school's mission statement. And I think what we should be thinking about today is we have a superintendent and an administrative team that if they were heading into March Madness right now, they would be 1,218-0. Because by tracking that storm, by communications with other districts, through a very deliberate decision-making process, 1,218 Henryville students are alive today, and I would say without question that a different set of decisions, we would be having an entirely different set of discussions today about the carnage in Henryville. So I think the first person that at some point we should recognize is Superintendent Monty Schneider, his high school principal Troy Albert, his elementary principal Glenn Driscoll. We have been in constant contact with them in terms of helping them identify relocation sites, secure student desks, secure textbooks, doing all the things that we need to do so that they can get their life back to normalcy. But I also want to recognize a few other individuals. Dr. Peggy Hinckley here in Warren Township, very shortly after the news came, emailed me, and she has personally put it on her shoulders to coordinate the efforts to organize an appropriate shipment of student desks, computer desks, office furniture, anything that is needed out of the Marion County area. And all of the Marion County superintendents are participating, identifying what they have as equipment, organizing that in a central location so that as soon as we have relocation sites identified, those can be dropped into Henryville so that we can begin the education process as quickly as possible. We have our department staff, and I want to say thanks to Heather Neal and Amy Horton, we have already contacted book vendors who have served Henryville, and we are working with them to provide an immediate drop shipment of books to these relocation sites. So while the devastation down there is unbelievable, the Herculean efforts of the Principals Association, I know Todd and Gerald went down yesterday John Ellis at the Superintendent's Association, Frank Bush at the School Boards Association. It has been a time where I think Governor Daniels has said Hoosiers are at their best when we experience our worst. And I will say that in our education community, it has never been more of a reality than it was during this crisis. So I think if you see any of those folks whose names I mentioned, thank them, because having grown up in Clark County, knowing families that lost kids, I have to tell you, and I say lost kids because a preschooler from my former district was one of the fatalities. And I will tell you, thank them, because this has been a Herculean effort. And Henryville is a very proud community, a very small community, and they're very resilient. But the efforts of our educators across this state to provide relief during this crisis, in my opinion, is probably one of the greatest attributes we have. So I just want to pass that on. It has nothing to do with a state board meeting, but it has to do with the fact that as a state and as a community, the education community came together for people in need, and I appreciate that more than anyone can ever know. So with that, let's move.
Amen.
Approval of the minutes from last month.
Can we get a motion to approve the minutes? We have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Any board member comments or reports?
I'll have a few brief comments.
Okay.
I'd first just like to thank Becky and all of the staff members. I've been here a short time, Dr. Bennett, but it's been my observation that we have a wonderful staff here at the Department of Education. They are very responsive. We get a lot of inquiries, emails, people contacting us in public with questions, and I am just really impressed at the response and turnaround time. Whenever I get a question I don't know, I'll contact Becky or a member of the staff, and they turn that around quickly and make the rest of us look good. So I'd like to say thank you to them. Also, I had the opportunity on last Friday to attend a Northwest Indiana Quality of Life Council panel on quality education. And I just want to report to the board that we really need to step up our efforts at rolling out the A to F explanations, because over about an hour and a half time period, and Vanessa Ronquetto from Edison presented, but over about an hour and a half time period, I sat there and listened to an explanation of A to F accountability that didn't comport with anything that I understood we did. Basically, it was posed as a system of quotas. The explanation of the growth model, I think, was incorrect. And I think we really need to double our efforts to make sure we're getting the correct information out, because it's filtering out to the rest of the community. This was a packed house of business leaders and political leaders in Northwest Indiana, and I just shudder to think that most of them left misinformed. Lastly, I just want to say that I've had some discussions over the last couple of days with staff regarding a basic Title I funding issue for Gary Community School Corporation, and I really hope we can get that resolved today in favor of Gary Community School Corporation. If it requires a vote of the board, I'd hope that would be something we could entertain today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
I'd like to make some comments, but I'd like to reserve the right to do so after the presentations on the takeover operators.
Anything else?
Sure.
Spotlight is not quite a spotlight on learning, but it's a spotlight on the Indiana College Cost Estimator, and Amy Marsh will introduce.
Good morning. In 2008, the federal government passed the Higher Education Opportunity piece of legislation that asked all institutions across the nation to develop a net price calculator on their website. And this was every single institution that takes any student who receives any federal funds whatsoever. So Indiana has a phenomenal response to this piece of federal legislation, I believe, and that is through the Commission for Higher Education Licensure with Dave Murray and Dan Elliott from the National Center for College Costs, which is housed here in Indiana. They're going to share with you what that product looks like and how it's available to all Indiana students.
Thank you.
Good morning. I was the Dean of Admissions and Associate Provost at DePauw University in 1996. A Lilly Endowment grant project led to my leaving DePauw to set up a grant-funded organization, the National Center for College Costs. Students and families who are covered by one of our grants have free access to me and my staff anytime they want our help on any aspect of the college process. We were hired by Stan Jones, then the Commissioner for Higher Education, as consultants in the second half of 2008 to look at state aid policy issues using our college cost estimator database to simulate answers to policy questions. We were asked, could we find a way to make financial aid eligibility transparent for any Indiana family ahead of time? Along in the middle of all this discussion came the net price calculator mandate. We've built what we think is the most comprehensive college selection, college admissions, and financial aid tool available to Indiana families anywhere in the country. In fact, we built the National College Cost Estimator database. I also want to thank not just the commission that Amy's already mentioned, who took out a license on this for 2011 and 12 so it could be a free resource for families. I want to thank the Lilly Endowment and the Lumina Foundation, who gave us grants to help with the build costs so I didn't have to hawk any of my grandchildren on eBay, I joke all the time. Personal thanks to Dave Shane, who's helped bounce ideas back and forth at various times. We're going to go right into the tool. Daniel Elliott is the project manager for the Indiana College Cost Estimator. This site is now translatable into 52 different languages. Daniel will just quickly illustrate that. Okay. In the lower right-hand corner, you see a calendar of events. If this was a month ago, you would have seen College Goal Sunday, Learn More's College Cash for College campaign, College Go Week last week, all of our workshops and activities around the state. We don't have a lot of time this morning, so I'm going to just show you a couple of the landing pages that are being really hammered, really hit hard. One is, not surprisingly, Learn Where the Money Is. You see types and sources of aid. You're going to see in a minute a report that allows you to do side-by-side comparisons of financial aid awards of any 3 Indiana colleges at a time. We calculate federal, state, institutional, merit, and need-based financial aid eligibility, and now we have added local scholarship information in all 92 counties. Let's take Kosciuszko County, Daniel, if you would, as an example. You see some of these are in dark blue. Those are websites. The third one down doesn't have a website, so we have contact information. If you are interested in visiting this site, given the brochure that you have, and there are major scholarship providers in your home county that we don't have on the site yet, we would love to hear from you. Let's go back to Learn Where the Money Is, Daniel. You'll see a series of things, but one of the things that has really surprised us in the right-hand side of that middle row, we thought we had a data problem when we went to demo this site for the commission back in December. 39% of the students hitting this site are independent students. That means you're 24 years of age or older, you're married, you have a child, something that makes you not a dependent student, not family financial information. 39% independent. So we started checking birth dates and high school graduation years. Lots and lots of older adults are hitting this site, looking to go to college for the first time, many of them. 1 out of 10 people hitting this site is a dislocated worker, one or both parents in the household. 64% federal Pell Grant eligibility. We have generations that are using this. In fact, I mentioned that the oldest person who's hit the site so far is 72. And some member of the commission said that person better get moving to get their college degree. The other part of this site that's really being hit hard, the second most hit, besides the calculator, which we'll show you in a second, are the profiles of Indiana colleges. There's a woman who's a regional coordinator for the 21st Century Scholars Program down in North Vernon in Jennings County. And she had a junior last year, a senior this year. She was nice enough to do a focus group with scholar parents and scholar staff on a Saturday morning. She said, last night, my daughter spent her evening, Friday night, going from college website to college website, trying to find out how her grade point average and test scores matched up against the college's profile. She said, Dave, one of them, it took me over an hour to find that information. And it was never in the next place on the next college's website. The other thing she said was, I've got Jennings County families who literally have never been out of the county at any point in their lives. They have no idea where they are relative to the colleges. So what you have, Daniel's cursor is right around where North Vernon is. So we'll take that button right there. Oh, that's IUPUC. There's Franklin College, University of Indianapolis. You click on any one of those pinheads and it automatically takes you to a profile of the college. You see there's a website, a map, a virtual tour if the college has one, and every one of the colleges in the state has a link on here now to their admissions application. If this is a senior, we're ready to go. You see standard demographic information on graduation rates, et cetera, tuition increases. Down below, you see the middle 50% on their test score ranges, so I have an idea how I might match up. So when I go to that map and I want to go to the Indianapolis area to visit the schools there, as an example, I can click on those pinheads and see which ones might be most appropriate for us in terms of admissions credentials, majors, et cetera. We don't have time to go into some of the other aspects of the site. We want to go directly to the estimator. And what we do is families provide us their financial information, and this mimics the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and the federal formula that's behind it that seniors and college students fill out. And this takes you to a report that has the expected family contribution. You can see here that there are three pieces to it: student income, student assets, accounts, and parent income and assets. And this is a sophisticated report that if parent assets are in play, it tells you how much of your parent contribution piece is coming out of your income, how much is coming out of your own personal assets. Daniel, let's calculate an Indiana college cost. Why don't you take my old employer, DePauw. Only option is on campus, so we're going to view DePauw's costs. If this was the University of Annapolis, we would have chosen on campus, off campus, or off campus with parents as an example. And the cost of attendance and the financial aid varies accordingly. So you see DePauw's costs here. You see federal and state gift aid. Daniel, if you'd hit that orange button on the state grant. Now remember,
It's pretty hard to read, so
I will be glad to read that. Remember that where we come from is college access. And we are trying to, through our partnership with the commission, trying to send messages that hit public policy issues very squarely. So what this pop-up says is it's calculated a grant. Your state grant is based on the Core 40 diploma. If you're able to complete the Core 40 with academic or technical honors, your state grant would increase between $1,411 to $6,115 based on the colleges involved. If we had put in academic or technical honors, this message would say, stay on this track, because if you drop to Core 40, here's how much state grant money you lose. And when that happens, what fills that gap? Typically for most students, that's additional student loan debt for that family. You can see that there are some scholarships here in this center section where Daniel's cursor is, things that we don't know yet, a music performance award. So the colleges have the ability to show additional scholarship opportunities that might further reduce the net cost if you happen to be a talented musician by the time you're a senior. You'll see that the Putnam County Community Foundation is here listed as a local scholarship where we could link right now. That will also print in the report for that site. You want to know this institution's 21st Century Scholars Policy. You want to know who they've excluded from the figures. Common exclusions, athletes, tuition remission recipients, employees' children, international students, because they tend to skew the numbers, but they tell you who they've excluded in case you see yourself as an athlete or an international student perhaps. You see a variety of websites, some of them DePauw specific in this case, some of them generic general websites like the FAFSA website if this happens to be a senior or a current college student. Now, Amy mentioned the net price calculator mandate. 9 campuses in the state have chosen, thanks to the commission's license, to use this as a free response to the federal mandate that they have a net price calculator. The Ivy Tech system is using it. All right? By mandate, if you're going to use it as your net price calculator, you have to show the full cost of attendance, including room and board. So if you look in that left-hand column, it looks like the total cost of going to Ivy Tech is $16,185. because the mandate says you have to go this far. Now, low-cost institution in the state, a low-income, naive family looks at that and says, I can't even afford to go to Ivy Tech. So the way we've chosen to mitigate that impact, once you show that under the mandate, you can immediately show additional financial aid beyond gift aid, and we put that second column there to say, we provided estimates of room and board because we had to, but here's how it all plays out with the direct charges only for tuition and fees. Full-time, $33.54. Daniel, scroll down a little bit further here. You'll see some of Ivy Tech's other possibilities, but you'll see right there, compare full-time and part-time aid. 70% of Ivy Tech students go part-time. Many of them think in terms of time and money, that's all they can afford. And so what we've done is we've created a comparison of 6 credit hours, half-time, and the financial aid eligibility with full-time. You can't get a state grant automatically unless you're going full-time. And your half-time Pell Grant doubles, and we're able to show students that if they take 12 credit hours instead of 6, the thousands of dollars of additional money that's on the table. We want to convert part-timers into full-timers because the graduation rates are significantly higher. We want more students taking the academic and technical honors diploma because when you look at the college retention data and graduation rates, academic and technical honors students graduate at higher percentages than Core 40. Core 40 at higher percentages than the general diploma. If we've got, I think I've got a couple minutes left. Okay. Daniel, if we can go back to the home page. And if we can go to the research other planning steps. Wrapped around the calculator is all kinds of information. The admissions process. What do we mean by rolling admissions? Early decision, capital E, capital D, early action. College entrance test, the whole schedule for the year, where you can link to a practice test or you can link to that. Daniel, if you would click on that one right there. As you might imagine, since 1996, we have developed a lot of publications and handouts, and they are now very much available on the site. A Greencastle mom called up and said, we're going to Colorado on spring break. What do we ask when we go to the University of Colorado and Colorado State to visit? I said, go to the website and print out the college tour tips, the questions you would ask students, that you would ask admissions, financial aid, professors. You're going to see tips for admissions, scholarship, and employment interviews, before, during, and after. Tips on writing essays. This is just a small portion of the kind of publications that are readily available for students and families and for staff in schools. We've had a lot of comments. We're licensed to do trainings around the state, free trainings in counties or regions. And I can't tell you how many school counselors have come up and said, you have just saved me dozens and dozens of hours every year with the information I had to go find and update on our school website every year. Pendleton Heights, 3 counselors saw this. They said, this is where every junior is going for their college information. We tried to build something that's so comprehensive that it has almost anything you could imagine trying to find, whether you're a student, parent, or someone working with students and families. So if anyone is interested in sponsoring one of these free trainings in a county, in a region, this is for stakeholders. This is for staff in the schools, youth serving agencies. We've had boys and girls staff, for example, from various places come to these trainings. Learn More Indiana's College Success Coalition volunteers, community foundation staff. We're very much interested in getting the word out on this tool. We've had almost 80,000 hits, and we didn't really start promoting it strongly until this fall. It's getting wide usage, and we want to increase that usage because we know we can improve diploma types and rates. We can convert part-timers into full-timers. We know we can have an impact on college access, college retention, and college graduation rates. And I've never done this site this quickly ever in my life. But I hope I gave you some sense of what's out there. Okay. It only covers Indiana colleges in terms of automation. We can do a federal calculation. And we have, right now, as you might imagine, as an organization for years, with all these gray hairs and experienced staff, once we have an expected family contribution, you can give me the name of just about any college or university in the country, and we can tell you ahead of time what's going to happen. If I know the expected family contribution, the name of the college, and some idea of the student's credentials. We've had to do all that interpretation just from experience. Now in Indiana, thanks to the colleges and universities, a big shout out to them because they've been providing the information that allows this tool to go forward and be the resource for students and families and staff that we think it is. So I'm hopeful that we can land the other 49 states because this tool is built to load their information into it, and then we can have complete, cross-pollination, if you will, across the states.
So the other thing I'm not quite sure I understand. I mean, everyone says that, college is like car buying. You never pay sticker price, or almost no one pays sticker price. So how do you reflect the fact that there are discounts or,
The colleges have been good enough to basically put their packaging tables into this on both merit and need-based aid. There are a few that haven't put their information in. Notre Dame has an institutional methodology. They have their own proprietary individual formula. They've been tremendously supportive, I want to tell you. They've called up to say, how can we help get the word out on this? Because we know this is an issue. Maybe not so much for Notre Dame and its students and families. So what we do is we calculate the federal and state eligibility, and then we kick them to the Notre Dame site where they can do the calculation of Notre Dame's offer. So almost everybody's in here. Everyone else, a few others in the private sector, we're linking to their site to get the institutional calculation. So they're really giving us that information up front. Dave Fevig, who's the Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at Valparaiso. Valparaiso has pushed their net price calculator. Very interesting at the ACT conference yesterday on a panel with me and Teresa Lubbers, the Commissioner for Higher Education. They are pushing this out there. And they know they're eliminating some families who, when they got to the spring of the senior year, would know Valparaiso is not affordable. But they're capturing people who find out it is affordable at an early stage. And so the colleges are really feeling their way along with this federal mandate. This is not easy stuff, especially in the private sector, with their price tags, to give this kind of transparency. But we've had tremendous cooperation. And at the federal and state level, I dare to say this issue of transparency, the issue of time to degree, real cost of education, et cetera, those issues I don't think are going to go away in terms of a focus on the part of folks like yourselves and others.
What's the cost of hosting a training?
There is no cost.
We're going to sign.
The commission has given us, as a part of our grant, dollars to cover our costs to go for travel and all of that, staff time to go and do these trainings around the state. We like to do it at least on a county basis. Although in Lake County, we've done a couple of trainings up in that area. Peggy Buffington, who's the superintendent in Valpo, has been very aggressive. It's a perfect example. She saw this in a training. She pulled her staff together, and Daniel did a training of all the administrators in all her school buildings. And on the evening of January 11th, in every school in the district, they had an open house for parents to take them to this site, introduce them to it, and to begin to get the word out. Because she knows she wants more of her students to have academic honors diplomas, if they can handle it. She knows she wants more of her kids going to college. When they do go, even though that's not our primary mission as a school, we want them to see what's out there and be successful. So I'm really glad you asked that. And we're open to any and all ideas. I have a business card that you're welcome to have, and Daniel and I would welcome doing a more in-depth demonstration of the site and a training, talking about information from your county that isn't in here yet on scholarship providers, et cetera. Anything else? Thank you very much for the opportunity to help get the word out on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no one signed up for public comment, so I believe we're ready to start on the sort of the meat of the meeting, the discussion on the turnaround school operators, and their reports, and Jim and Jackie. And
So we'll start briefly by having Jackie answer any questions you might have regarding the updates to the community engagement reports from all of our turnaround school operators and our lead partners.
Good morning, everybody. For the first time, I'm not going to have much to say this morning because our turnaround school operators are here, and they will include the community engagement reports within their presentations. So,
Okay. Any questions around those reports that were provided? Okay. With then I want to introduce Mary Gardner. Mary is a specialist that's been working with us since the beginning of the work and focusing particularly on our lead partner work. And I wanted to, one, introduce her to you today, and two, give her an opportunity to briefly just update you on where we are with those initiatives, those efforts to turn around schools prior to getting into our turnaround school operator presentations. So, Mary?
Good morning. As Jim said, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what our lead partner schools have been doing at Broad Ripple Magnet High School and at George Washington Community High School. I'm going to start with Broad Ripple. Broad Ripple has 2 lead partners working there. One of them is Scholastic Achievement Partners, and Scholastic Achievement Partners has taken over the professional learning community time, which is 45 minutes twice a week, and all teachers attend this professional development, and the professional development is aligned with additional online PD the teachers are receiving and with their classroom observations and coaching that they're also receiving from Scholastic. And so far the teachers are very pleased with what they've received. They feel like it's meeting them at their level of practice and that it's really addressing the school's critical areas of need. And one of those areas of need that it's addressing are literacy skills that especially a lot of the middle school students come in lacking. And 135 students at Broad Ripple are currently enrolled in an intensive reading intervention for 45 minutes every single day. And this reading intervention can be tracked by the classroom teacher, by Scholastic, and by us at the department, so we can see not only how many times has the student been receiving the intervention services, but also how successful those services are being. And then finally, Scholastic held a community meeting on February 23rd, and 50 parents, students, and community members attended. And they were overwhelmingly positive about what they're seeing at the school, and their main concern was just hoping that this professional development would stay at the school and provide a consistent foundation for teachers and for students. And their next steps are to continue to increase rigor and relevance in the classroom for all of the students. The other lead partner at Broad Ripple is the New Teacher Project. And the New Teacher Project is providing professional development to 6 administrators and guidance counselors at the school. And it's really focusing on coming to consensus and setting norms for teacher evaluations. And they're helping administrators provide very clear and specific feedback for their teachers to help them really know how to best improve their practice. And these administrators are receiving between 12 and 15 hours of professional development each week, and in addition they're also receiving help with data analysis and the creation of additional resources as the school needs. And their next step is they're going to take these skills that they've developed and actually apply them to real teacher evaluations with the focus on areas that have been historically difficult for administrators to evaluate, such as special education services. And the New Teacher Project also is working at George Washington Community High School in the same capacity. The only thing that's different is they've also administered an instructional culture survey, which 45 teachers at the school filled out. And they found that the school's area of greatest need were observation and feedback, professional development, and peer evaluation, which aligns very nicely with the services that George Washington is receiving from the New Teacher Project. And then the other lead partner that's at George Washington is Wireless Generation. Wireless Generation also holds professional learning communities twice a week for 45 minutes that all teachers attend, and they're focused around promoting deeper student engagement and developing English language arts skills across all content areas, so even for science and social studies and math teachers, focusing on those critical skills. And the PD was customized based on what they saw were needs through a needs assessment that they administered. They're also coaching all English language arts and all EL teachers at the school. They observe them for 45 minutes, and then they hold a feedback session with them for 45 minutes. So every ELA teacher is receiving about an hour and a half of professional development in addition to the PLCs every other week. And finally, they're coaching the school leaders as well. They have 30 minutes of coaching with each principal, and then they hold a 90-minute learning community for the administrators as well. So that's sort of a quick summary of what the LEAD partners are doing, and I'll be back next month to update you further and in greater detail. But are there any questions that you have at this point?
Any evidence so far of impact on achievement?
Well, ISTEP began this week, so they are really hopeful that they'll see some achievement there. They're seeing sort of more kind of qualitative things. Students' writing has improved, teachers feel. The students that have been working in the reading intervention at Broad Ripple, they've started to see growth, and they're continuing to monitor that.
How's attendance? Is the attendance up?
At the PLCs, for the teachers for receiving professional development,
That's
or
an interesting question, students and teachers.
I know that for the teachers, that they have had excellent attendance at all of the professional learning communities. Student attendance, I'm not sure about, but I could look into that for you for next
One of
month.
the big things that we saw in these visits when we had the public hearings, students didn't seem too interested in coming to school. Now, you could say, well, that's students and their parents, but it also made you wonder how welcoming, exciting, and fruitful the day was when they weren't bothering to show up. And I just thought we might see an immediate bump. Hey, school's more interesting. These folks care about me. There's engagement here. Maybe they always cared about me, but now it's more obvious. I just wondered if we saw student attendance go up. Timeliness, drops and tardies up in attendance is always a kind of a leading indicator to me. It's hard to advance a score unless you're there. And I just wanted to know if you had that.
That's an interesting. When I went to NASB on a dropout situation a couple times, number one deal in student engagement, and I appreciate you making that comment. Number one cause.
If we're putting intervention in there, and also teacher absentee rates should go down when there's a successful environment and there's a feedback going back and forth. It'd be an interesting thing for us to know. Might not be the end-all be-all, but that'd be our first clue, I think. Maybe we're creating a new environment.
Could I follow up on my question? Sorry. ISTEP doesn't go to high school. So remind me, Broad Ripple is 7
through 12.
Is GW also?
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to look at 7 and 8, but what about the high school? Is there any way to, it strikes me that, especially wireless generation, couldn't there be some kind of periodic pinging of the students to find out if any of this is settling in and having an impact?
Sure.
Yeah, they have the ECAs for high school, and then they also have
Right.
benchmark assessments that they administer. And I'm not sure what the schedule is for that, but
Yeah.
we'll
Certainly
look at that too.
Okay, the other thing, I just should I'd like to, before the end of the year, I'd like to see if I can come out,
Oh,
and I'd like to probably observe one of those professional developments happen at the end of the day, is that, or in the morning? Or
all day long.
All day long?
Mhm.
How do they get all the teachers?
They have built-in IPS has built-in professional development time, so it's sort of one of their preps.
Oh, I see.
They'll go.
Okay, well, I'll work with you guys to figure out
Yeah,
when I can
that
come
would
out
be
and see that.
What's the mood of the teachers? Are you sensing increase or an improvement in morale, a sense of movement on their part, a buy-in?
Yes, I think there really is. In the beginning, I think they were a little unsure, like, this is another thing coming. Is this going to be something we're actually going to stick with, or is this just, they've had a lot of programs before, but I think that because they see that they're in the school every day and they're going to be there for more than 1 year, they do feel a real sense of buy-in, and they feel that they were actually listened to when it came to determining the professional development. They think in the past, they sort of feel like things were kind of shoved at them and maybe it wasn't what they actually needed, whereas Scholastic and Wireless and the new teacher project all really looked at what were areas of need that the teachers felt that they needed. And so the teachers do feel that they were actually listened to, and then the professional development was designed.
By the way, that was a consistent and loud theme. If you read the reports and went to any of these public hearings, it was this month that, next month this, next year this semester we'll try a little this. Stuff would arrive, people would arrive, the teachers felt like okay, we'll do this for a little while now. And then, then, oh boy, this isn't, then, so I would say if we could just get a sense of normalcy, we'll do something over a 2 or 3 year period and check growth. I think, Neil, don't we have some way to, aren't there some instruments in the school to check immediate growth in addition to attendance? See, what test do we have? We have the ISTEP, obviously, for, where are we at with?
End-of-course assessments.
End-of-course assessment.
In algebra. End-of-course assessments in algebra, and also the end-of-course assessments in English 10. And I know Acuity works with some of that.
Sure.
So Acuity, which is provided,
growth, yeah.
Acuity will track some of the English 10 and also the
And
ECA.
so is
on the
Acuity being
algebra.
used, and do we?
So
So the district has both Acuity and then in more shorter term windows, their benchmark assessments. So we can look at those. It's just one thing I would just qualify by saying that interventions haven't been explicitly tied to the benchmarks or Acuity, but more about those sort of transferable skills that cut across the assessment. But we can certainly look, because there will be some noticeable trends there.
Well, the discipline of getting to Neil's point is quite important to us, I would think. Not for, I mean, one to know accountability, but for the professionals to say, if something starts to show signs of working, you get a little more energy even behind it and more attentive and more follow through. If you don't know, you're wandering around in a black box. So anything we can do to tie.
and I said from the beginning, as a school administrator, and I'm probably making too much of a generalization or some stereotype. The more difficult situation that you're in, as far as grade, the level of academic achievement, etc., the more time it seems that as an administrator you're spending on management and in just simply controlling the building and in those variety of situations. And you understand the importance of the professional development in the professional learning communities and all the things that we've read about Dufour and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, when you're taking care of business and you're trying to create that safe environment, those don't get attention. And I appreciate the opportunity that I would have someone to stand beside me and say, okay, let's help me on those things, because those do make the lasting impact. And so I appreciate that piece. And I think if we're going to make grounds, this is a great place to be. So.
When did you say the professional developments are held? What days?
At Scholastic, or at Broad Ripple, it's on Monday and Wednesday, and at George Washington, it's Tuesday and Thursday.
Any other questions on our lead partner work?
All right. Thank you.
We'll transition to the presentations from our turnaround school operators. We'll be going in the following order. Edison Learning will start. Go ahead.
Sure. Would you, don't get a big list of things. Could we get a couple key measures we want to monitor, then just get something back to us, like, okay, we'll pay attention to tardies, absentee rates, we'll pay attention, how we're using Acuity. Let's don't get a list of things. Let's take a few things and not be involved, but I'd kind of like to see if we're making progress. I think it might be good for everybody involved, especially us, means we got involved in this. We probably ought to know what the barometer's doing.
Well, I think that's a great point. I mean, the other point I was going to leave, I mean, we got to remember that these were schools that were just as problematic, and we decided that, on the other hand, there were some things that encouraged us to think that maybe with the current structure, but some help, they could make the transition and start to turn around themselves without needing a full intervention that the other schools required. But we need to see evidence that that's happening. Otherwise,
responsibility.
Otherwise they ought to not escape that responsibility.
Sure. You may want to add a few outcomes.
Yeah.
That's what.
ECA.
Yeah. No, in the course assessment. That's what I say. I just, not only that, but with the instruments we have. I don't want to throw a whole bunch of new stuff at these folks now. Let's try to blend it in there so it's you know, who told us to do this now? It's with stuff we have, if we're monitoring it. So,
Go back to Jim's comment, we want that to be our dashboard.
yeah.
And what 4 things are we going to watch?
Absolutely.
So we'll commit to it. We will see it every meeting and
Yeah, definitely.
so where there's an update on the dashboard.
Absolutely.
Order
Thanks, Neil.
What are TSOs? We'll start with Edison Learning. We'll present on the work thus far at Roosevelt Career and Technical Academy. Then we'll hear from Ed Power, who will update on the work at Arlington Community High School. And then lastly, from Charter Schools USA, we'll update on the work at Emmerich Manual High School, Thomas Carr Community Howe Community High School, and Emmett Donnan Middle School. Before we begin, I just want to provide some framing introductory comments for the presentations. The presentations will hit on essentially 5 different areas. The first is to provide an update on key findings from deliverables 1 and 3. 1, as a reminder, we looked at an assessment particularly of student-level data. 3 was more of a school-level evaluation. So where are we at that broader level? They'll then talk about some plans for recruiting great teachers and leaders, which was deliverable 2. They'll also talk about student recruitment efforts. They'll also talk about community partnerships. And they'll also provide some introductory thoughts on deliverable 4, which is the school turnaround plan. And woven in there will be some successes and challenges along the way in the work. And so with that, I'd like to invite Todd and Vanessa to come up and represent Edison.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here. I'm Todd McIntyre. I'm Senior Vice President for Operations with Edison Learning, and this is Vanessa Roncato, my colleague. She's Senior Vice President for Educational Services, and she's our project manager on our work with Gary Roosevelt. We have spent the last, Vanessa's going to hand around copies of the presentation. We spent the last several months looking and analyzing the situation at Gary Roosevelt very carefully. We've had approximately 30 different staff members from Edison Learning that are, have been involved in site visits and data collection and analysis and preparing our reports. And we've come to a number of very significant findings, and we are beginning the process now of putting our turnaround plan in place. I'll just start with talking about some of the major findings that we've had. The overall context is that Roosevelt High School in Gary has a very rich legacy. This is a school that in the past was obviously very focused on student achievement, and they've produced scholars and leaders. If you just look at the community leaders in Gary itself, a significant portion of them are Roosevelt graduates. And some of them from several years ago, and some of them from not that many years ago. But there is definitely a legacy there. They produce those scholars and leaders at a high rate in the past. And what we find now is that's just not the case. The number of students that are achieving at a very high rate has gone down dramatically. There is essentially a culture in which student achievement is not the focus. There is an insufficient number of systems and structures in place that focus on making certain that students are prepared for college and career. And that's manifest in a whole variety of ways, and we'll talk about a few of those over the next few minutes. There's a veteran staff. The average tenure of the teachers in Gary Roosevelt is 22 years or more. But what we find, and there's teaching going on in every classroom, but what we find when we visited classrooms, and we visited over 95 classrooms in full lesson periods, is that the level of rigor is not sufficient to get students to perform on state assessments or other assessments at a proficient level. So teaching is going on inside the classroom, but it's not going to get students where they need to be on average to be successful. Outside the classroom is another story. And frankly, there is not a culture of achievement and success outside of the classroom. At any given time, there are scores of students in the hallways. And there is a tremendous effort amongst the school leadership just to try to control that sort of crisis environment that they're in. And so a lot of the time that the leadership has in the school is spent on attempting to bring more of a learning environment into place. But that doesn't seem to be a very successful effort most days that we've been there. Students that are falling behind seem to not be able to catch up either. There are very few limits or opportunities to accelerate their learning. Intervention programs are inconsistent, and there's a lack of structure for identifying students and getting them into a structured intervention program so that they can catch up and get back onto grade level. Let's see. Whoops, sorry. With respect to leadership and operations, what we find, as we've said, is that there's too much of a focus on crisis and behavior management, and there is a lack of planning. What we find is that the leadership cannot articulate clearly what the goals of the school are, what the mission is, and that's not shared throughout the building. Teachers say that in the relatively recent past, there have been professional development plans, that there have been structures in place to work together, to do joint planning, to have a focus on improving the quality of teaching and learning, but that seems to have subsided. And this year, in our focus groups, no teachers could identify any professional development programs that were in place for the 11-12 school year. When we look at the operations of the school, there are a few things that stand out. We've had difficulty sort of getting insight into all the operations because much of the data that's captured at the district level is sort of district-wide. We weren't able, for example, to get school-level budget information. So we weren't able to sort of tease out how dollars are used at the school level, and we're having to look at it from a district-wide level. Technology is another thing that stands out. As we know, students need to have access to technology to learn 21st century skills. And there are a significant number of computers, something like 700 computers in the school. But a vast majority of those are 6, 7 years old. They seem to mostly be isolated in computer labs. And there isn't much of a sense of how the technology can be integrated into the regular classroom. You don't see interactive use of technology in the math or science or reading classrooms. You see students going to a computer lab and taking a technology course there. The facility is another significant concern given the need to turn around the school and reopen it as in a new form in August of this year. The building is in poor condition. The bones aren't particularly bad, but sort of the meat on top of the bones has a lot of concerns. Finishes and those sorts of things are in poor condition. Lots of graffiti and paint that is in bad shape. Broken doors and lockers and those sort of cosmetic things that will need a significant amount of attention. Probably the thing that's even a greater concern is the safety situation with the school. Almost every exit door is padlocked or chained shut. There are about 4 or 5 doors that you can actually egress from the building. So in the event of a true emergency, there would be almost no way for all the students to be able to get out of the building. And many of the safety systems are compromised. They work, but they don't necessarily work completely. Intercom system is intermittent, for example, or the fire safety alarm systems are sometimes not fully functional. So that sort of gives you a picture, academic, operational, of what we found in deliverables 1 and 2 of our work in Roosevelt. I'll go ahead and talk about the phase 2 now, and then we will have Vanessa come and talk about the work we're doing to put the turnaround plan in place. Phase 2 is the human capital plan, and this is a different focus. This is really a plan that's focused on the future as opposed to the findings that we've identified in phases 1 and 3. The human capital plan is our plan to staff the school, to find school leadership and school staff. We have you'll see on I'm sorry, I'm not keeping up with my slides. We have developed a number of tools to start this process, and we have kicked off the process of hiring the staff. The principal position has been advertised, and by the end of this month, within about 2 weeks, we're going to start the process of giving the current staff an opportunity to indicate whether they want to continue to work at Roosevelt and taking them through a recruiting and hiring process. And then shortly after that, by the beginning of April, we will begin the external recruiting process. On slide 6, it shows our complete plan. It's from where we are now, it's probably about a 12-week process, 12 to 16-week process for us to fully staff the school. As I said, we'll start with giving the internal staff an opportunity to apply for positions. They will be screened and interviewed, and overlapping with that, about 2 weeks later, we'll begin external recruiting. We've already had a number of discussions with partners like Teach for America and others who may want to be able to provide us with additional staff if we're not able to recruit a full staff from the Gary area. Our goal is for the staff to start as early in July as possible. School is targeted to start in mid-August, and we believe that we need about a 6-week training and transition time for the new staff so that we can completely train them and prepare them for the reopening of Roosevelt late summer. There are about 90 on the teaching staff right now, and we are still putting our complete plan in place for that, but it'll be approximately that number.
Do you have any indication how many students do you have presently in that building, and how many return? Do you have a target?
There are just under 1,000 students in the building now. Our goal would be to have at least that number going forward. It's an open question because student recruitment is just getting started. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The school has had precipitous declines in enrollment over the last several years. In the 2010-11 school year, there were 1,300 on the rolls. This year, it's just about 1,000. So 30% decline in 1 year, and that's obviously a very serious concern. In order to be successful operating the school, we have to have a critical mass of revenues and enrollment in order to make that work. There's obviously significant competition in Gary from charter schools and vouchers and other places where parents can go. And our goal in operating the school will to make it as competitive as possible with those other programs. We have to.
When you said enrollment is 900, is that right?
Yeah, 985, something like that.
Now, is that actual an active tails in chairs count, or was that an ADM mid-September count?
How many are there today?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
I don't
Sorry.
know.
Tails and chairs.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was actually.
I like that, tails and chairs. But I'd like to have a count today. Can we get a call up there and ask them how many checked in?
We can work on that. There's a note later on in the presentation on the last slide about some of the concerns we have about the quality of data that we've received. Attendance is reported at 95 or higher all the time, and that just sort of doesn't match our observation. We know that the number of students enrolled at the beginning of the year was over 1,000. The latest numbers that we have are just under 1,985 or so. But honestly, we do need to feel better about the numbers that we're getting, because when we count the number of students in the classes and multiply, it's a little hard to come up with those numbers.
How much cooperation do you receive?
The cooperation has been modest, I would say. The department has been very helpful in getting us, in serving as an intermediary with the school corporation. I'd say our direct efforts to get information have been not particularly successful, but the department has been very helpful in working with us to get information.
For instance, attendance is something every principal knows every day. You know by about 9 o'clock who.
So I'm just going to cut right to it. So when you say your direct request of the districts have not always provided you the data that you want, can you give me some specific examples? Because here's the deal. If we have to play the intermediary, that is a role that we're going to play, because it is imperative that the exchange of information doesn't get in the way. So I guess I want to know very specifically, and I would say this to all three of the TSOs, I want to know what you need to get this mission accomplished. And then our staff that's here, let's be sure that the districts in question understand, one, the seriousness of the request, and two, the potential penalty for not fulfilling the requests, which does include, I think, the authority of this board to withhold funds. So I just want to make sure we say that very publicly. That's what we need to know in order to facilitate a smooth transition. So I want to know specific data.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bennett. And I do have to say that Jim Larson and the turnaround office have been very helpful in whenever we have made these requests. And we've made specific requests, literally pages of specific line item requests, and we track those on a weekly basis to determine what's been received and what hasn't been received. And the number continues to go down.
Now, contrasting this report with Dr. Bennett's report on taking care of young people, we just heard something today we got to do something about. I want the fire marshal to go up through there and tell me that all those children can be taken care of if there's a problem. My son or daughter wouldn't go there if I didn't know that. And so how can we have other people's sons and daughters go there if we don't know they can get out safe? So I want to know last time the fire marshal was there, and I want to be assured that these children could get out, if the young people could get out of there safely if they have to. They're just as valuable as anybody else's kids. We ought to know that. Now, I think we should get a report on that. And I think we should get it real soon.
Yes. The superintendent's question, am I hearing you say that what could be done directly, you're having to do through triangulation with the department?
In many cases, yes. Yeah, we submitted, the process is that in October, November, we submitted a list of data requests to the district. We got a response back, which probably fulfilled, I'm making a rough estimate here, 30% of the items that we requested. And so over the course of the last several months, it's been mostly working through the department to get those items. So we asked, an example would be we asked for copies of all contracts with outside vendors, transportation, food services, et cetera, copies of collective bargaining agreements. And some of them were provided, some of them were out of date, some of them were current. Some of, it was probably just a technical snafu, but one, I think the food service agreement only had every other page, so it must have been duplexed and we didn't get every page of it. So we had to go back and get those kinds of things resolved. So, it's sort of just the process that you have to go through to get the data. Some of the data I don't think was easily available. The one that's pointed out here around school level expenses, it appears to us that the district must not, track it at the school level. It's probably more of a district budgeting because we can get school level revenues, but we can't get school level expenses at this point.
For the board's information, I have a trip planned. It's on my schedule. I was just checking this. I'm trying to find the date.
April 10th.
April 10th. Thank you, Joni. I was on April 6th as I was skimming through the calendar. To appear in front of the Gary Community School Board. So as part of this, if any of you would like to join me, we're going to make some very direct asks. We are going to give some very clear directive in what is expected.
Yeah, and I just don't know how fast the fire marshal can visit and get some report out. But once you hear something like that, some of this stuff will take a little longer, but I think we could figure that out in a hurry.
Jim, we'll make that contact today.
Well, I agree with Dan. When you go down that list and look at those findings under the school safety, that's urgent. Those are things that should be addressed.
Get out. We'll have a.
That should be addressed today.
So
I don't know. I can't do that today, but I can do this one.
About 3 weeks ago or so, we submitted our last of the findings reports, Phase 3 report. We've updated those a number of times in response to feedback from the department and pivoted to start working on the turnaround plan. We felt like we had a sufficient amount of data and findings in order to really put our plan in place. Our goal through all of this is to put Roosevelt in a place where it's producing scholars again, where it's producing leaders and community leaders, and that students in every class are working to achieve at a proficient level, and that teaching is rigorous and successful. We want the legacy to return. And so Vanessa is going to talk you through a few slides about our turnaround plan, and then I'll come back and wrap up.
Good morning. As the team has begun the plan for developing the school turnaround model, we really believe in our 5-strand design, which provides the underpinnings of support for what the goal is of raising student achievement. So as we look at our design model, we see our 5 strands here, circling student achievement, which is really designed to be interdependencies in the functioning, the development, the focus of the school. And then that is glued together by core values, which will be looking at and implementing at the school and moving that forward in the building. So as we look at each of these design pieces really quickly, it really is a holistic design that is moving forward, raising student achievement. Edison Learning is looking at student outcomes, and really what we want to happen is we have all of our students being successful learners, confident individuals, responsible citizens through really focused efforts in each of these areas that lead directly into those design pieces. So as we drill just a little bit deeper into what the school turnaround plan will look like, we'll be looking to develop fully in each of these areas a concrete plan around learning environment, pedagogy and curriculum, assessment for learning, student and family support systems, and leadership. In learning environment, the first one that we'll be looking at is really focusing on building a community of learners in a culture of student learning and achievement that really creates the conditions for achievement. So you can see under the learning environment some of the key pieces that the team develops at the school, plans, concrete plans around what that looks like. So as we work with teachers and work with school leadership, we'll be looking specifically at what do core values look like. How do you intentionally teach those during the day to students? During what time of the day does that happen? How do students know when core values are being represented? Because students are students and they need to be taught what it looks like, what it doesn't look like, very explicit direction and modeling and representing those values. As we look at really building a nurturing physical environment, what does that look like in the classroom? Positive behavior systems, mentoring for students, student voice, making sure that students have a voice in their education and what they're learning and can articulate that. So as we go through each of these strands, you'll see really consistent development of the framework that defines that. Under pedagogy and curriculum, we'll be really looking to develop 21st century learning skills for students through core learning skills. What that looks like for students is really developing I can statements so students can articulate what they need to be able to do and how they're going to set goals to move towards that particular learning skill, and then spend some time in reflection on have they mastered their goals, are they moving in the right direction, and how do they want to refine those pieces. Assessment for learning is really looking at using data in a timely fashion, making sure that it's flowing to the teacher and to the students so that when we're thinking about designing instruction, it's meeting individual needs, it's differentiated, and it's really informing our daily instruction with students. Using student-friendly descriptors so students can speak to what their objective is for the day and help monitor and progress assess whether they're meeting those individual objectives. Under family and student support systems, we're really looking for development of multidisciplinary teams that look at students, all students, so not just students that are at risk or stand out as our students that we need to track behavior on or attendance with, but really all students in the school. What does it look like to meet the needs of each of your tiers of students? And then finally, a critical piece would be the leadership. And we'll be looking at effective change management systems. That's really results driven, not driven by what our intentions were. So we'll be looking at a process, a system, which really takes the plan, cycle, act approach. When we look at what our plan was, did we revisit it? What were those results? And do we need to revise that to move forward? And continuing that cycle throughout the system. As a school, as our staff has really looked at putting together the design model, what really drives the work is looking at the features of an outstanding school. So each of those strand designs have features that are called out at a high level. So we'll be looking at these research-based statements that serve as our three-year goal and put into place systems to help assess where are we at, what are our next steps, what are those high leverage pieces that we can get put into place quickly, monitor to get some quick wins and some achievement. So those reflection rubrics are used with the staff and used with the teachers to really get a reality check of where are we at and how do we want to move forward, what will get us from beginning to developing, from developing to proficient to exemplary, and monitoring those, looking at those regularly to make sure that we're moving forward. On the community engagement piece, I've been really working steadily in the community to reach out to community and business partnerships. We've had a series of surveys that have been available to staff, to students, to parents, and to community partners that we have identified as being engaged at Roosevelt. What we're really looking to find out from each of the partners is what's been working well, what's been making a difference for the school community, and then what is the vision or what do they hope they could bring to the table. And so we've been hosting a series of one-on-one meetings along with our initial 30 focus groups that we did when we first started working at the building to get feedback on many of those areas. We've been looking at how to engage the media to help support getting the message out into the community that we are hosting community events. We've had a series of those over the past couple of months that are really open to the public to come and have just a dialogue about what's been happening, questions you might have, how do we get the message out, and have had attendance. Some of the meetings have had pretty good attendance and some have not, but we've tried to vary those locations, vary the times so that they're accessible to folks in the community. As we move forward, we'll be looking to have another round of those as the school turnaround plan is fully developed. Folks have been asking questions about what does it look like, how is Roosevelt going to be different next year, and so we want to be able to present that in a concrete way to the community. We have worked with a local communications team, MediaFlex, who is helping the team craft what our communications plan will look like, putting concrete activities, pieces, dates, all the pieces that we would need to really have a concrete plan, and that's under development at this point, and we'll be ready to share that, include that in our reports to the school turnaround office.
And much of the work of that marketing and communications effort is, of course, to get the community involved, find as many resources as possible to invest into the school, but just as importantly is to get parents to think very seriously about how they can get involved with Roosevelt School, bring their students there. And so student recruitment is the other major piece. As we mentioned earlier, it's essential that the school have a critical mass of students in order to make the programs work. You have to have students in order to have dollars in order to offer the full program. And so we use a process with all of our schools, partnership schools across the country called Everyday Enrollment. It's an intensive process in which we're monitoring and working on enrollment not only before school starts but throughout the entire school year. And we will be implementing those best practices with our work in Gary Roosevelt. It'll focus on intensive communications and events and community outreach so that as many people as possible know about the turnaround effort. They get a full picture in their mind of what Roosevelt will be like when it reopens its doors in August as a new school.
When you start doing this, remind me how the budget works. We get the per student money. But if this facility has been poorly managed and maintained, then, and you're trying to attract students and operate a school there, how does that work if it needs, not a rebuilding, but a remodeling or painting and all? How does that come out of the per student, or do you get a fund for that, or what's going to happen?
Jim, you want to? Sure. TSO. Yeah, so the statute says that, per your point, the student tuition dollars will flow to the operator, and that there are two items, because they're funded out of property taxes, the district must continue to provide, and those are transportation and building services. Now, when it defines a building service and transportation, it's just the same level of service, and so for a district such as Gary, one of the challenges that we'll have to work on is that while the building needs substantive repair, so too do many of the other buildings. And so those building services and building repairs that the district's still responsible for will not look any substantially different for Roosevelt than they do the other buildings. And so while the statute does say that the district's still responsible for it, that piece around same level of service, I think, is going to be something that we're going to have to think honestly and openly about as we try to be sure that the building itself is fitting for the turnaround work that Edison Learning will be doing within it.
Is it clear that the building's being maintained this year?
Yeah, I would say yes. I'd say that the buildings continue to be maintained. I mean, clearly, custodial types of services are going on. There are people there. The boilers are working. The building is being cleaned. So yes. So, just to wrap up, some risks and challenges that we think are important to lay out as we move forward with the process.
Before you go forward, can I just follow up on Dan's point just briefly? I think one thing we should also keep in mind is that Roosevelt will be eligible for all of our competitive grant processes that we have here. And I really want to encourage Edison to apply. I'm not sure how that affects our timeline of getting the contract done, but I think one of the things that can't be overlooked here is the importance of the timing factor. I mean, time really is of the essence here in terms of concluding the negotiations with Edison so they don't miss opportunities to participate in competitive grants.
And the department's been very helpful in terms of making us aware of the timelines and the different grant funds that are available. So we're eager to do that as well. We've mentioned a number of these risks and challenges already. To Mr. Walker's point, the timing of the negotiations are critical to us. We have gone and started to go at risk on some operational components of this effort, particularly around teacher recruitment and student recruitment efforts that we're beginning. But we need to see progress on the negotiations with the contract to feel comfortable that we can continue to go at risk on those items. There are a number of legal obstacles, and General Counsel's office, the department, has been very cooperative in meeting with us on essentially a weekly basis over the last 3 or 4 weeks to begin to address some of the legal obstacles that present themselves when we get into this sort of turnaround work that's been identified. And those focus on things like liability, risk management, and governance in particular that have to be addressed in order for both parties to be comfortable. And then to Mr. Elsner's point, there has to be some kind of an agreement with the school corporation around the maintenance of the facility and investment in the facility. They control the capital dollars. Those negotiations have not begun yet. We have reached out to General Counsel for the school district to begin that process, and the department has been helpful in helping with that. So that process, we will be able to give an update shortly about whether we feel like that's moving along or not, but there clearly are some risks associated with that, and identifying capital resources to ensure that the school can reopen in a condition where parents and families and communities want to come there, and we can rebuild that legacy that Roosevelt wants. We thank you for this opportunity. This is the kind of work that is right in Edison's wheelhouse. These are the sorts of schools that we have dealt with in Maryland, in Pennsylvania, in Detroit, all over the country, in similar communities that have gone through economic and demographic change. We're ready to take this on. We believe that Roosevelt can become a very successful school and a place that can produce great scholars and students that are prepared for career in college. And we are working very closely with the department to make sure that that would happen. We look forward to continuing this work.
You don't have student information under your first bullet. Are you getting the student information you need to be able to communicate with them and their parents?
We have had a reasonable amount of student information that we've been able to get, mostly through the school, honestly, is where we've been getting that instead of going through the corporation, and they've been cooperative with that.
What, from your experience as a Edison in similar situations, what are good benchmarks of progress for us to know and understand? I mean, a lot's going to happen in the next 18 months. And I'd be interested from your experience, do we have some checkpoints that we would know as a board or that you would report the progress? I'm intuitively, I kind of know, but I think with your experience, you know more than I might on that, or the board. What are good barometer we're making progress?
We're going to make commitments in our plan over the 4-year period around each of the elements that are the 25 elements that are listed in this slide around our five pieces of the design, the 5 strands of the design. So first of all, we want to be held accountable to our promises, and so we will come back to you. I believe we're going to be reporting on a twice-a-year basis, and that we will report to you on where we are against our plan for those 25 elements. I think you'll want objective, sort of third-party measures as well about, that would be across all the providers. And what I can say is that we need those standards to be rigorous, but they need to be modest, and they need to be accelerated over time. We need to have modest expectations in the first year because we're creating an entire new culture and having to rebuild something that is in very poor condition now. But we want to be held accountable. We are in the accountability business, and those need to be accelerating over time. And so I would expect that you would want to know, things like that we talked about before, attendance, leading in kind of indicators of whether students and parents are buying into the community, and then indicators of whether the students are performing. Edison Learning has its own formative assessment system where we track the students on a monthly basis in reading and math, and those are the kinds of things that we use to figure out whether we're getting traction with our programs. That data could be shared with you, as well as other types of formative assessments.
I'm thinking even in the next few months, we have an intention together to hire an excellent staff and to train and form them in what we want done. I don't know what the indicators are. That's going well, but you could say we've hired 25, 50, 90 people. I guess that's one way. I'm just real interested in, and I suspect, again, you have a lot of experience of how to measure this progress. If the building's in bad shape, what's the triage, critical path to having a building that looks a little bit new and better, curriculum. So in planning and ramping up to this, there's probably some benchmarks we ought to know about and say, we're on target, we're 80%, we're 90%.
We'd be happy to share our startup plan. The turnaround plan looks at every aspect, educational and operational of the school, and sets specific actions in place. We turn that into sort of a hardcore project management Gantt chart in which we're tracking individual items. Predecessors are set for every items, and timelines are set, and owners are set. We're in the process of developing that now. We'd be happy to share that with you and give reports on that if you'd like to have that. Yes, sir.
I apologize, but you need to say again or be more specific about this issue of the lack of clarity on sources of capital investment. I mean, how do you anticipate that being resolved? How are we going to get clarity? We need to get clarity. There are obviously things that need to be done to the building. So what's the process for getting clarity?
First step is we've begun discussions with the department around our concerns about this, and Jim Larson and Matt Vors have I think taken that on and helped provide advice and look at some of the underlying issues underneath it. Number two is our general counsel has contacted the general counsel of the school corporation to schedule a meeting to begin to discuss these issues. We have received a copy of the school corporation's capital spending plan. I think the version we have may not be the most recent version, so we're trying to get that to have an understanding of what resources that they've set aside for capital improvement, and then we're going to have to establish some priorities. The building has been inspected. In our Phase 1 report, we included building inspection reports, which lay out many of the findings that I've described here, including from a safety inspector and a regular building inspector. So we know what the items are. We're in the process now of prioritizing those and putting cost estimates. It'll be a triage. There will be essential. We're going to have some items that we need to have done before we'll agree to walk in the door, frankly. And we need to get those agreed to with the school corporation. And then we'll have other items which will be more elective or that we'll need to put a timeline on over the next couple of years to address. So we're in the process of making that happen. the next step, of course, is us meeting the school corporation and determining the path forward, and if necessary, and I know the department will be part of that process.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any expectations for the ratio of internal to external staff hired for next year?
Well, the goal would be to have as many Gary teachers that are from the Gary area as possible. I think in terms of Roosevelt teachers, we can't at this point say exactly what percentage would want to apply and stay as part of that. We'll find that out in the next few weeks. I would say that we do not have a specific target. What we're looking for is the most highly qualified and ready to work staff that we can. We want a staff that reflects the student body. We want a staff that can connect, have good competency with connecting culturally with the parents and the community. But we need a staff that's going to get it done, most of all.
Any other questions? Todd, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your report.
I'd like to introduce to Jimmy Meadows and Roz Floyd will be representing EdPower today. Marcus Robinson, the CEO of EdPower and Chancellor of EdPower, sends his regards. He is meeting with the Charter School Growth Fund today, a critical last meeting there. As you'll hear from these two representatives, these are really for the Arlington turnaround work, the two best people to describe the work that's been done so far and the work ahead.
Thank you. Again, I'm Dr. Rosalind Floyd, and I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation for EdPower, and this is Mr. Jimmy Meadows, who will be the new principal of Arlington High School in the fall. Technology. As you see, we've created an org chart based on our forecast of what the students are going to need for an effective education at Arlington High School, headed by our CEO and Chancellor, Marcus Robinson. We did a evaluation where a group of researchers and I spent multiple days at Arlington evaluating the present culture. And some major findings and areas of concern that we saw were safety, a culture of low expectations, a lack of community involvement, poor culture and disruptive classroom behaviors, lack of cultural competency among the staff, a lack of parental involvement, opposing views, a lack of consistency among the staff regarding the new single-sex, single-gender classrooms that were established in the fall, and a culture of misinformation around the turnaround process. Safety. Major safety issues, there's no building safety issues that we found. The building is in perfect condition. They had a $25 million renovation. It's a great looking facility, but the problems are happening inside the school. There's constant fighting and threatening behavior, and it has been accepted as a culture within the building. There constant use of profanity, a lack of adult supervision around the building. It seems as if some teachers lock their door during passing periods because of the amount of rowdiness in the hallways. A culture not focused on student achievement. Low expectations and lack of rigors. Most classrooms that we visited, no students were actually participating in learning. No critical thinking skills were being taught. A lot of students spend a lot of time in GLC, which is the in-school suspension room, which was described by the teachers as a dumping ground, because basically a lot of students who were having issues spent the majority of their day there. Lack of textbooks. We rarely saw any students carrying textbooks, and we rarely saw any teachers using textbooks to teach students within the class. Community and parent involvement was another issue. There was no observable tutoring or mentoring programs active within the building. The staff reported disconnect between the home and school culture, where they can't get parents to participate, and they weren't actively seeking it because one of the administrators felt that PTOs just don't work in high school. And one of our attempts, we weren't able to reach parents of Arlington students because the district wouldn't allow us access to parents. They said that we could use the parent liaisons to facilitate that process, whereas the parent liaison picked the phone up, dialed it. We weren't allowed to ask any questions and tell who we were. And once the parent answered the questions, the district hung up and called the next person. But when we returned the second day to complete the list, the district refused to allow us to do that. So we had no access to parents. Lack of cultural competency and professional development. We saw no professional development on a consistent basis within the building, 1 or 2 optional IT sessions in the summer, and they could sign up for online professional development. A culture of misinformation. A lot of students were completely confused around the turnaround process because of information they received from teachers and administrators, such as the uniforms were going to cost $1,000 if they stayed at Arlington. The gym was going to be given to Cathedral. There would no longer be athletics at Arlington.
So hold on there, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You said this information, this misinformation was coming from teachers and administrators.
Yes.
So is it coming, is it the MFS network, My Friend Said network, or is it the...
No, we've had parents call our offices. I've had parents call me personally. We've had parents call the NAACP offices and report that they were given this information. I've talked to people and teachers within the building who've assured me that they were getting this information and asking, was it true?
Okay.
And there were
So, I mean, do people in authority that are paid by the district put this out in memorandums or in speeches, or what kind of data do we have behind this?
From what I understand from the parents who have contacted me, it has been in speeches and where they're pulling students out of the classroom and actually telling them this is what will happen at the school next year. What I gave was an overview of what's presently happening, and Mr. Meadows will sort of talk about some of the future plans.
Dr. Bennett and board members, I am honored to be the new principal, be named the new principal at Arlington, the new Arlington High School next year. And Dr. Floyd failed to inform you that she is alumni of Arlington High School, proud alumni of Arlington High School. And I did my student teaching at Arlington High School in 1995. We are from the community. We believe that we have a system in place or a plan in place to successfully educate these students at Arlington so they can be successful. So our recruiting efforts are very aggressive in identifying talent, mission-driven educators that come in to help us turn our efforts around. We have a great partnership with Teach for America where we've had identified some building leaders and also some teachers that will come in and help support our efforts in this turnaround effort. In that operations, we will have an administrator and a dean and a counselor supporting 2 grade levels, the 7 through 12 component. Our teacher recruitment, we've had 2 successful hiring fairs already with Ed Power to identify talent that will come and help us with our mission to help in our efforts through the Woodrow Wilson Fellows and also through various media outlets that help get the word out that we are looking for the talent and we're looking for the best and the brightest to help us with our mission. An overview of our plan already, definitely safety is a priority. From the documentation and the interviews, students and staff have informed us they do not feel safe currently at Arlington High School. So we will provide a safe and structured learning environment where all scholars are trained to be successful lifelong learners in a competitive society. Arlington will function as a public college preparatory school focused on ensuring all graduates are prepared for college and career opportunities. So we are clear about the mission that we will have at the new Arlington High School. Arlington, number 1 priority will be safety. So we will have a comprehensive safety plan. We've already identified staff members in our network to be a part of the school safety specialist team to put some systems in place in our new Arlington, clearly defined non-negotiable behavior expectations based on respect for self and staff and also the community. And we'll also have ongoing communications with parents and families regarding our expectations to maintain a safe environment on that campus. Academic accountability measures. Every Friday, the students and the staff will know exactly where they are academically in regards to standing. Of course, we have some systems in place to offer an extended day opportunity where we will offer a component of breakfast, lunch, and also a dinner component for students. And then also a quality assurance dashboard check. That means a student information system where anyone on our staff will have an opportunity to look at it student by student dealing with discipline, attendance, and academic data through the power schools that we're having our network team being trained on currently. And then a consistent application of academic requirements to participate in athletics and extracurricular activities, having a code of conduct for our athletes, holding them to a higher standard, and also in leadership to build leadership capacity. Professional development, we are already planning a full-week intensive training with our staff prior to school starting. Our projected start date will be August, middle of August, and based on best practices within our network, embedded training using our data information system, as well as weekly professional development with staff on Fridays. We do plan, based on schools within our network, to have ongoing professional development based on data-driven based on the data that they receive. Our recruitment efforts, as we say, regarding students has been a challenge throughout the day, but this is our current outline of how we go about ensuring and informing our scholars that will be there that we will have a new Arlington and that this will be a place that they will feel safe. Community engagement, Dr. Floyd is going to talk to you about our community engagement and the efforts that have been underway regarding our turnaround.
We've actually contracted with the Forest Manor Multi-Service Center, which is in the Arlington community, to provide community engagement strategies for us. They're going to hire directly a director of community engagement who's responsible for going out to the community, facilitating multiple meetings at the different multi-service centers. We're trying to reach the parents where they'll come. So we've identified places and resources that parents visit because we haven't had much success at the school level where we're actually going out to where they live to recruit parents to be a part of the turnaround process.
I think to note that a very important partner in that has been Mrs. Carol Craig and Joy Mason from the NAACP. They have, prior to our partnership with them, have been working with partners to, and they've actually been on hold until they have a system in place or a team in place so they can match the services with our scholars that we're going to serve in the fall. And of course, Arlington Nights, we've already identified many faces, many voices, one night, knowledge, nobility, integrity, growth, and honor and tenacity. We will all be working as I indicated. We're from our community. We're about servicing the scholars in that community to make sure they are successful. Are there any questions?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit, you kind of scooted over it, but on your, can you go back to the status of plans for student recruitment right there? You say
Yes.
that you haven't been able to get very good data from IPS, is that correct?
Yes. We actually received student lists within the last week. However, those lists were missing phone numbers. We weren't able to access discipline records. The special ed students, we have a lot of data around special ed students that we actually still need.
So how have you been able to communicate with students?
We haven't been able to communicate with students
What about
because
teachers?
they won't release the data.
What about teachers?
During the evaluation process, we visited teachers, and the teachers were told by the district that it was optional to talk to us, and some of them did. I'd say around 80% of them actually talked to us during the evaluation process.
How many students are at Arlington? What grades? And,
They report around 1,000 students in the building. Our observations show that there's much less. The students that we were given as going to stay at Arlington next year was a little less than 700.
So you have approximately 700?
Approximately 700.
Yes. Is that grade 7 through 12?
Grade 7 through 12. And most of those students were in the middle school group. There were 78 seniors and around 100 students in the other groups.
How many? There's 78 seniors?
78 seniors said they
Are
would
you
stay
confident
at Arlington.
their juniors going to be seniors?
Yes.
Okay, you confident of that number then, of those people that actually attend there?
Well, those are the students who defaulted to Ed Power, the students who didn't choose a school, so they were automatically assigned to us.
Do you have any idea how many juniors are in the building that actually really attend there, not signed up?
I think it's maybe 121, 120-ish that are there in the building.
Thanks, Fred. Just kind of getting to see the scope of the size of the operation.
So, Jim, could I ask you to interject here a moment and explain to the board, the comment was just made about default. Would you please inform the board of what that process means at IPS and to the turnaround school operators so that the board understands what that discussion is about?
Sure, absolutely. So the term default stems from I guess an agreement, for lack of a better word, that was coordinated between the district and the operators here in Indianapolis, whereby if students and families did not make a choice either to enroll at the school for next year or to enroll in a different school by a certain date, the word default was used to describe that they would remain at the school. Now, the date for the default has evolved since the initial conversation, in the sense that it has been moved back, and the district has expressed various different rationales for why the default date has moved back. But it has passed at this point. And at this point, the data is what we are all anxious to see, so we can get a clear sense of who the operators will be serving and what their respective needs are. I think it's critical that not only is high-level data provided, but to Dr. Floyd's point, that comprehensive data around discipline records, comprehensive data around special education is provided to be able to really build out the necessary plans to serve those students.
So before we get into the granular piece of the actual data around special needs students, what have you, discipline records, I want to talk about this because I think there's some comment there. I know Neil and I were talking briefly before we started this morning about this article in this morning's Star. So what the understanding from the board is, or from my perspective of what you just said, there was an agreement between the turnaround school operator and the turnaround school operators and the district that students could choose other IPS schools.
Sure.
Okay, which is, that's fine. And if they did not by a certain date, those students automatically default to the turnaround school operators.
If that's their boundary school.
My question is, were the turnaround school operators also given a chance to market or discuss with the students on an equal basis what options would be available to the students during this decision-making time frame?
Unequivocally, no.
Well, that's
an uninformed
very
choice.
disturbing, to say the least. I mean, that's unacceptable.
Well, let's choose, but you can't know about the choice.
Right. How can you make an informed choice if you don't have all the information about your options?
So,
what are they hiding?
Hearing that, unless I hear any dissent from the board, I think we need to have a conversation with the district.
Well, should we, I don't mean to interrupt, because this is a critical point, but I just wonder if we should, I shouldn't assume. I would think that we might hear the same thing from Charters.
Well, I
School
just
USA,
was watching them nod their
but
head, yes.
I wonder if we should let them make their presentation and then talk about what we, because I don't want to assume until we hear from them. I won't be surprised if it's the same kind of response, but maybe we ought to just finish and then talk about our strategy vis-a-vis the district, because it'll reinforce. If on the other hand they tell us they're doing fine, then we know we have a specific Ed Power district issue. If it's in fact both operators that are having this issue, then we have a more systemic issue, arguably. So would that be okay?
That'd be fine.
Before you go though, could you talk, I mean, you have a really tough challenge ahead. You've identified a school that IPS has failed very dramatically based on your findings about not just the lack of teaching, but even the lack of safety.
Yes.
So what kind of career, how are you going to, I'm pretty confident about, even from some of the things you've described, that you can reinstitute the safety. I think the uniforms and the culture of respect, I know that Marcus has had a lot of success in that regard. Talk a little more about the curriculum or the interventions you're going to use to try to get these kids to the point where they can have a potential for a future in life.
Yes, at the middle school level, we're definitely looking at 2 doses of language arts and math. And of course, within our network.
2 doses every day, you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
every day on a daily basis. So they'll have a specific language arts curriculum and also a math component, but also a component in that would be a skills acceleration course based within our network, based on success at Tinley. They have had a successful skills acceleration course that builds students' skills levels up so they can successfully achieve and do well on standardized testing. Also in that system is having an extended day. If students are not meeting the expectations during that core time of that minimum of an 8-hour time, then they will be given additional teaching and opportunities to learn with a different modality, with a different teacher, so they can meet those expectations. So that's critical to make sure that we have more time with those scholars to build them up, build those systems up.
And I think that'll be the importance of the data dashboard system that we're purchasing, because at any time you can look at a student and say, this is their achievement, this is where they need to be, and we can design intervention strategies around those student needs at that time.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Floyd and Mr. Meadows, if you're taking on a big challenge here, I appreciate it, thank you, your commitment. What do you need from this board and the department? I'm not putting you on the spot, you might want to think about it, even write some things down, but in our efforts to serve you and support what you're doing, what do you need from the department or this board? What would help you be more successful so we understand what you're up against and what you might expect from us? Whether we can do it or not will be another thing, but I'd like to just understand that as a board member. I think our board ought to understand that.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about access to students. We definitely need that access to students and parents so that we can explain to parents what are our plans and what is this going to look like, because the only voice that they're hearing are the messages that are coming directly from the district. So the turnaround office has been great in providing us information and support, but I believe we do need to find a way with the board's help to gain access to parents where we can actually talk about it. Because even the ones who may have chosen to stay at Arlington, if they had the information around what Arlington was going to look like. I mean, basically, they got to make a decision based on, the competitor's idea of just don't like change.
Let me ask if you simply just asked the district for this access and the ability to speak to the parents about what you're offering, have you just directly asked them?
We've asked them, and as I said,
what's the response?
They gave us the option of having. They said it was a privacy issue around giving out parent information, and that's why they provided us a person to make the phone calls. But then they came back and said that's not an option. We're not going to support that either.
We have observed. We've been inside the building, and we have observed opportunities. We've interacted with the students informally, but we don't want to disrupt their, the process of the school.
Sure.
But we've observed, announcements made during learning time regarding going to the other schools.
During class period?
During school time, yes.
That's a kind of a
Have
transgression
there
of
been
a
fairs?
norm. You don't disrupt or.
Have there been fairs or something for parents and students to kind of be made aware of their option, and were you allowed to participate in those?
They did have one fair where all groups were allowed to participate and to present what your school's going to look like, but it was very poorly attended. I might have counted 4 or 5 parents at the most so I asked them how did you give out their information around the fairs, because how do you recruit the parents to come, and basically did Connect Ed messaging, and it didn't go over very well.
One last question. When I recall vividly from the hearing we held in the summer at Arlington that the NAACP was very committed to the school. In fact, they actually, as I recall, wanted initially to be given the opportunity to, in a sense, take over the school or create a plan for turning it around. It sounds like, from what you described on your slide, that you've engaged them and they're working with you. So can you just talk a little more bit about it? It sounds like they're supportive and they want to see you succeed. Is that?
I'm actually I'm a part of that group, the NAACP Education Committee, and have been for several years. And for the last 3 years, we've actively tried to support Arlington High School, along with Carol Craig, who was actually one of my deans when I was at Arlington. We've tried to, we've provided some mentoring. I think we have maybe 7 that are active. It's just been a challenge to get cooperation within the building for some of the things that we want to do.
We're excited. On February the 16th, we actually had a meeting with the partners, and the partners were committed to working with the New Arlington, with the current administration, to make sure we match their services with our scholars and with our mission. So we're excited and grateful that the NAACP was that transition, that holding the organization that kept our partners together. So now they are in transition with the multi-service center to release that control and actually go and do other initiatives that they are set to do.
We understand the huge task that we have before us, and we're going to be very open to support from all partners, especially the NAACP, which has been there from the beginning.
But if their policy or, we took a responsibility here on this school, and then we've assigned you willing partners to fulfill it. As a board, we don't want to operate the school. We don't know how to, but you do. So I just want to make sure I know from people who've been put in the barrel what they need from us, so to speak. That's not.
You
have a position of responsibility.
Information and access to students and parents.
Yeah, without going into great specifics, I'm going to ask that Jim Larson get a very specific list of what data we need, what information we need, and we'll take it from there. And I mean very specific.
Yeah, and I didn't, whatever our role is, it seems like there's a big job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm supposed to just start. So, good morning. Hi, I'm John Hage. I'm the President and CEO of Charter Schools USA. And before I start, I just want to say that from Florida, where we come from, we want to send our condolences to the folks of Southern Indiana and what's happened over the last week. I also want to, on a lighter note, say that we appreciate the warmer weather today, and hopefully it's been a warm summer or warm winter. Maybe it's a little bit because the Hoosier folks welcomed us up here so well. It's been very nice to come up and bring some of that sunshine up here. Instead of folks coming to Florida, we're coming up to Indiana, so it's been great coming up. So thanks for all the warm welcome we've had. A couple folks on our team here. Sherry is our Vice President of Education. Joe Loftus back here in the back is our legal counsel. Robert Bain helping us with community relations as a consultant. Les Martin, our brand new parent liaison. And just to point on Les has worked at all 3 schools, currently is with IPS, has agreed to come on board with us and transition. So I think he deserves credit and courage for making the move because it's difficult. You can imagine being in his position, and has a great experience and background working with the parents and folks with all the schools, so we're glad to have Les on the team. With that, we've outlined a specific vision statement for these 3 schools that the state of Indiana has asked us to help turn around. And this speaks to what we as a team have really thought through. Our vision here is to create the highest performing schools in Indianapolis, built on a foundation of high expectations. All students can and will learn in a safe and nurturing environment focused on character development, academic rigor, and 21st century high-wage skill, creating 21st century high-wage skills and jobs. All students will receive rigorous, research-based instruction from highly qualified teachers that accelerates learning and content mastery. We are guided by an academic philosophy that all students can become self-motivated, lifelong learners, function as responsible citizens, and actualize their potential as productive members and leaders of their community and our nation. During the last several months as we've begun this process, we obviously have been going through a lot of assessment, and these will be the outlines of the agenda that we'll go through quickly. The major findings, a plan to recruit and retain highly effective teachers. We'll give you an overview of where we are in our school turnaround plan, our plans for student recruitment, specific community engagement partnerships we have, challenges to overcome. We were asked to be blunt and forthright, so we're going to do that. And opportunity for success, and then a Q&A session. But please, at any point, you're the board, interrupt me. Yes, sir?
I can't see.
I apologize. So with that, the major findings. The first step is I want to point out some positives. These schools are historical schools, some, in fact, up to 100 years old. Some of the top leaders in Indiana have graduated from Howe and Manual, and these schools have amazing alumni groups. In fact, Facebook, you have folks on Facebook that actually have well over 1,000 members, over 1,000 members of alumni who continue to communicate with each other and support these schools. Not as much at Madonna, the middle school, but definitely at the high school. So we're definitely seeing strong alumni groups and folks that are coming back to the table who feel that they're being welcomed and there's a seat for them to participate in the conversations. Another positive is there really is some involved community groups. And we're having a lot of meetings with those folks, and partnerships are being developed. We had a meeting the other night that I participated in with well over 40 different members there coming together, community groups from the NAACP to local charities to university partnerships coming to the table asking how can they participate, how can they be a part of this change. So it is a positive I want to mention to the board. However, these schools, as you may know, have a very low expectation of excellence. The culture is literally the most pervasive problem in these schools. The achievement is a result of a culture of low expectations. These schools did not become low performing overnight. Year after year after year, there were a pervasive feeling within these classrooms among staff and leadership that these schools were doing okay when in fact they were not. That excuses were made, quite frankly, that the performance was not necessarily indicative of how the school was operating, when in fact it is. There's a sense within the schools, and we've been in every classroom, we've observed every teacher, and some multiple times, that that this is good enough, and good can be the enemy of great in many of these cultures and schools that we've managed over the last 15 years. And we feel that one of the most pervasive problems is that people have, and at all levels, and oftentimes parents themselves, have basically come to the conclusion that this is exactly the plight we have. This is our neighborhood school. This is as good as it gets. And I want to compliment Dr. Bennett and the state board and the legislature and the governor for taking the bold move to actually turn around these schools, because the culture is the basis of the turnaround. It's the first step. There's a polarizing environment. We expected some of that. We knew what we were getting into. We had these discussions early on when we went through the selection process and the national search that was done. But I will say the politics of this one are even a little more aggressive than even I expected. It's not that there aren't nice things said and meetings that are done and niceties put forward, but the underlying current is very polarizing. It creates an environment where fear, quite frankly, to discuss things openly with us in the schools, teachers to transition over, students to stay involved, programs to be taken away, and even materials taken from the school. And so today we're going to go through some of those and be quite forthright with you on what we've seen. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Sherry Hage, who will talk through some of our academic deliverables.
Good morning. So, teachers and leaders and our recruitment and retention, we are very excited to say that we've hired approximately 40 teachers already for these schools. We have hired a 7-9 principal for Howe. We've hired an assistant principal for Donnan. We have hired a student services coordinator that is currently housed at Manual. We have 2 parent liaisons that have accepted positions with us. One is here today, Les. We have hired an athletic director for Howe already, and we have hired Byron Ernst as an agricultural science consultant for us, and he is working on building the Agricultural Science Academy at Manual High School. We have had teacher recruitment events where we have gone out to the larger community and advertised positions, what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish. We have been looking for talented teachers who are truly committed to educational reform and want to participate in this turnaround effort. We have had job fairs, we've had hiring fairs, and we've had what we call leadership assessment centers. In order to be a leader within our organization, you come and typically spend 4 or 5 hours with us, going through a very rigorous process to understand if you are truly committed to the qualities that we look for in leadership within these schools. You have to be data-driven. You have to be committed to educational reform. You have to be committed to such things as a longer school day and higher expectations for students. So we look for that in our leadership assessment centers. We do believe in performance-based compensation. So every teacher, every principal that we have hired, we walk them through what our compensation looks like. And you know what? If you are working hard and you are helping the school and the students achieve their goals, you have the opportunity to make a bonus for your commitment to ensuring academic success. Enrollment versus staffing. We are pretty good at understanding our enrollment needs and then basing our staffing on enrollment needs. There has been a lot of fear put out there to teachers. Well, what if they don't hit their enrollment numbers? You're not going to have a job. So we've really tried to explain to people as we move through the enrollment cycle and process, as we add students, we know we need to add teachers. So we have been very strategic and selective as we've gone through our hiring process. Our goal is to, by the end of March, have our leaders in place so that they can begin walking through this process with us, and our teachers by June. Our turnaround school plan. We do have some samples in these notebooks for you that have brochures around the programs that we will be offering at Donnan, Howe, and Manual. We have moved to an academy model for our schools. you will see that we will be having a freshman academy at Manual and Howe, as well as specific academies for the upper grades. The brochures are in there, and I would encourage you, if you want to look at such things as what we will be offering. Manual will have a fine arts academy. We will still have fine arts at other schools, but there will be a focus at Manual on fine arts. We will be having an agricultural sciences academy at Manual. We continue to say it, and it continues to be up in the air of, well, they're not going to have FFA at Manual. Yes, we are. We are having an agricultural sciences academy focus at Manual. At Donnan, we will also be having academies for the middle school. We are in the partnership process with Cambridge to go through our process for a site visit and ultimately becoming a Cambridge Center at all 3 schools. You can look at the brochures and see, but ultimately where that ends up is a high school student can graduate with 45 credits towards their college in the future. So if you look at those brochures, make sure you read them because they outline very clearly what programs we will be offering in our academies. We are a data-driven organization, so when you talk about creating school goals and what are the metrics we're going to use as we move forward, that's all part of this process where we will sit down, we will begin to understand the performance at each school, all the way down to the individual student level, all the way back up to the school level. We will create our goals as we move forward, and we will benchmark our students throughout the year to ensure that we're hitting our targets so that we can provide those remedial opportunities for students when they are missing some skills as we move throughout the year. Technology. We've done a lot of research and a lot of investigation into the technology in its current form at the schools. We do have some infrastructure concerns in a couple of the buildings, as well as we have concerns about the instructional focus. We see a lot of computers and we see a lot of technology in the school. We also see a lot of social media and Facebooking during instructional time. So we are getting a handle on how we will incorporate technology for instructional purposes back into the school environment. We will be having athletic programs. We have made the decision as an organization, for those of you who know, Manual has not had a football team in a couple of years. We made the decision right out of the gate that we will be putting football back at Manual, and we will be starting this year with a junior varsity team, and we will be building that program back up. We will also be having football at Howe. We've been clear about that since November. We will be continuing with the athletic programs that are in place today as we move forward. Extracurricular and co-curricular activities, the programs that are in place, we are looking and reviewing right now what we will continue with. Here is the gauge. If the programs and the students are being successful and the students are achieving at high levels, we want to keep the program in place. If the program is not meeting the needs of the students and we're not seeing the academic results that we need to see, the question becomes, how can we make that program effective for students? And is that something we should be focusing on year one? We have moved fast and furious on keeping JROTC at the schools. We spoke to Colonel Bagley as recently as last Friday. We are told that the final contract is to the legal department for review, and we should be having an answer on that contract within the next few days.
Sherry, I just want to brief the board. We had some questions. John and I met with Dr. White. There was some concern about decommissioning the program as opposed to leaving the program there. John and I did meet with Dr. White. Joe Loftus helped draft an agreement letter where Dr. White has agreed to leave the program in the school and transfer the program to Charter Schools USA. And in my conversations with Colonel Bagley, who oversees JROTC, he indicated that the Army understands that school takeovers are becoming more common around the country, and that they have faced this before, and I don't foresee a hurdle here, but I just want the board to understand that we've we've kind of jumped over a number of hurdles already, and the last one, as I understand it, is the hurdle that the Army will have to approve the contract.
Yes, sir. Dr. Bennett, actually, without his intervention in this, we would not be anywhere, because the official position at IPS was they were moving or shutting down these programs at these schools. With the department's intervention and really hands-on movement on this, Dr. White has agreed to allow the program to stay if the Army agrees for the program to stay, and for another program to transfer from Arlington, where Ed Powers is okay with that, over to the program at Howe. And so in those cases, we feel that we've done the documentation. Now it's a matter of the Army agreeing to that. It may be helpful at some point for a little political help for someone to pick up the phone, Senator Lugar, and help with things like that to make sure that we're not just running out the clock with time. But otherwise, yes, sir.
And he's indicated he is willing to intervene.
Thank you.
Okay. We will be having a uniform policy at all 3 schools, not a dress code. There is a difference. So we will be having a uniform policy, and we will be providing to each student 1 free uniform so that they can come to school ready to learn, dressed appropriately, and we can then take all those social issues that come with middle school and high school, hopefully, off the table.
So there is no $1,000 uniform
There
cost?
is no $1,000 uniform, and you do not, I can go a step further, you do not have to wear a blazer with the logo. We are currently reviewing and received on Monday from IPS a transportation plan and a food service plan. There is a meeting tomorrow where we will be going through the details of those plans to determine how these operations will occur next year for these schools. Facilities is part of that school operations meeting tomorrow. We are going through facility usage agreements, maintenance agreements, and getting a handle on how facilities maintenance and management will occur. We will.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify? I'm looking through the brochures as I'm listening. This freshman success program that's described in the annual brochure looks very exciting to me and very smart. Is that also going to be available at Howe? It's not listed on the Howe materials.
Yes,
Okay.
well, there is a freshman brochure for Howe.
Right,
as well.
it looks different though. Oh, I see, okay.
There's
So-
a freshman, okay, let me explain
Oh.
the brochures real quick. If there's a middle school 7-8, there is a brochure for the 7-8, middle grades. There's a brochure for the freshman academy, and there's a brochure for the high school academy.
Okay, I see.
Okay, good question. New school times and calendars, we will not be running a balanced calendar. Our teachers will start on July 16th. They will be in 3 weeks of what we call new teacher induction. Every teacher that we have hired and we have spoken to about that new teacher induction is very excited. They understand that if we really are going to close this achievement gap that we are looking at, we have got to all come together for intensive professional development to really focus on the goals and how we are going to move forward through the year. The longer school day as well, we are offering our teachers a little bonus because we do expect them to work a longer school day. So our timeline to complete our turnaround plan is by the end of May. Recruitment. So back in February was when that window of student recruitment for IPS was occurring. Just to kind of give you a very high level of understanding, we do have data discrepancies in what IPS has said these students picked you or defaulted to you. We have some discrepancies on that we are working through. We still have 45 students that we believe picked us that we do not have information on. We're working with IPS to finalize the enrollment timeline because as Mr. Larson mentioned earlier, that timeline has continued to shift, and we have been told it will continue to shift until the magnet lotteries run and are confirmed.
So let me just ask the direct question that we asked Ed Power. Mm-hmm. And I know you were nodding your head back there. Are you having similar problems in terms of obtaining student data that were as they were presented by Ed Power?
Yes, we are.
And if you have the same problems of being able to get access to market your choices, your plan and your vision for the school
Yes.
to students and parents.
Yeah, just to put a fine point on it so that you see, because, in this process, you can imagine it's a difficult place we're in. We still need to work with IPS. Dr. White has been, gentlemanly, and we've had good meetings. But in the last meeting, we had about 15 of our folks there, including our council, and Jim Larson from IDOE. And the question was put out very specifically to Dr. White. Would the district be providing any information on any students or any parents or any addresses from anything other than the defaulted students that we just received information on, which is much less than the students that are actually in the school, as you might imagine? And the answer was, of course not. And the reason given was, and I think it was quoted in the paper this morning, so I don't think I'm misquoting anything, is that we're in competition with you. Why would we give you any of our own information to help you compete with us? I responded and said, well, Dr. White, I think if parents had all the information available to them, and we trust parents to make good decisions for their children, then I think, this is not about competition for resources. This is about what's best for kids, and that really didn't work, so we kind of let that lie. So it is the number one problem we have.
So we are currently working with and have a final data call with IPS this afternoon to begin the transfer of student records and data. We have been told that the deadline for that is March 9th.
I'm sorry, I've got to say, go ahead.
Let me ask a fact question.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear that right. The final transfer of?
So the electronic transfer of data for students that have either chose us or defaulted to one of our 3 schools, we are giving them the requirements that we are asking for in terms of the electronic student data, and that is supposed to be transferred by March 9th. That does not include such things, and I think the earlier organization mentioned that they did not receive discipline records. We have told that electronic data will not include discipline records on the students. So we are still waiting to see. We have a very prescriptive list of the requests that we are making for these students. We're waiting to see what we actually get.
But IPS, then, if I hear you right, is making their own decision about what they feel like letting go and what they don't feel like letting go. B is making it, I think they were open about this, in their own interest in terms of capturing a customer, as it were. And C seemed to think that you're the person they're dealing with instead of this board. Is that we're grateful all of you are willing to help us, but I think the responsibility is us, not.
Well, and again,
I'm not asking. I just wanted to. Those are fact questions.
Yes, I think the answer is yes to all of those. I think the answer for us is that to the degree that the board can be helpful in forcing the district or through the department or through some means to have access to the data that is necessary to ensure that we actually have a successful start. It's very difficult in this case, basically, as we internally, the way we've seen this is we're starting the race a day late with a leg tied up behind us, and we're asked to compete on a equal playing ground. And it's just, we're here to do a good job, and we will do a good job, but we also know that this is a partnership and that it requires everybody playing the role necessary to succeed for these students. So, yes, sir.
Dave, my logic is that the state takes responsibility to educate. Subsidiarity, we gave it to IPS. These schools, they have not been able to fix these schools, in our opinion. The data was pretty clear. So now we said, let's bring in new management to serve these students. And that was my earlier point from this board. We have taken responsibility. So we want those young people and their parents to have some new options. And it seems to me that we're putting, some other authorities putting a curtain across that, saying, no, you can't know about those. The state might want new options for you, but we don't want new options for you. We want you to do, you're with us. You can't know about that unless you really work hard. And it seems to me then we're being undercut in our desire to give new options to these young people. Because they're not beholden to the IPS district. So somewhere we got that, there's a gap there, huh? That's what.
I mean, I think
is that a good way to describe it?
You've said it. I mean, you've said it. You've taken the words right out of my mouth, Dan. As you have in the past. That's exactly how I'm feeling about this. I mean, I'm not naive, but this is not. To talk about this as a competition is just wrong-headed. This is not a new school moving in. If this was a private school or even a charter opening up to try to compete, that's one thing. But this is a turnaround situation where these schools have been judged to be failure, and not just judged. They've demonstrably shown objectively by over years to have failed the students in them. And to your point, the state therefore intervened to take control of these schools and to provide different options. And I think you said it perfectly well. For IPS to try to disrupt that or make that more difficult by seeing this as a competition and literally trying to take and lure kids away, kids they failed until now, let me go on the record as saying, because they want the dollars that go with those schools, is just unacceptable, is absolutely unacceptable from the point of view of me and I think this board. And I think, Tony, now is the time to talk about what the options are that the board has to try to make sure that they don't start a day behind and with a leg tied behind their back.
Matt, can I get you to kind of come forward and let's talk?
Maybe we'll let them finish there.
Well, I just want to ask the question.
You're right.
I do want to ask the question about, we're going to need to know what the options are.
Sure, absolutely. And that's something that I'm like for the state board. One of the things that we're running into, obviously, is FERPA and operating within the confines of FERPA, and what records are required to be produced versus what may be produced by IPS. So that's something that we're looking at, that legal's looking at, and something that we can certainly put together a memo and send to the state board in terms of what our options are.
Yep. FERPA.
Right, what's FERPA?
Family.
Educational rights and privacy.
Okay, that's right.
But, well, I'd be interested to see that, but I mean, we have responsibility to educate children in the state, and there's a system set up to have districts do it, and if districts can't do it, then there's a system by law where we take it over. So, I mean, whose information is it?
Well, absolutely, it's the student's information, but it's
a student, yeah, but who? Yeah, it's
maintained
for because we're serving the health and well-being of our citizenry, our residents. Well, I suppose we ought to let finish and then kind of recap.
Can I just say one more item?
It becomes more clear as we talk what's going on here.
We have also asked Joe's firm to look at this as well and work with the department. We've dealt with this in dozens of districts across the country, and FERPA really is a excuse for not providing data, because the truth is that you can do this through non-disclosures. Mail houses can receive data. We can never see it. All of a sudden, we can pay for labels. They can show up. Mailers can go out. This can be done. There are ways to do that if the legal folks and the political willpower is there to sort of force this process. So I just want you to know that we have dealt with this in dozens of times across the country, and it really is not, I mean, it's a federal rule. We deal with it all the time. There are ways around the federal rule to ensure still the privacy of the parent, but at the same time that we have access to what is ultimately public information. Yes, sir.
Because I mean, IPS's responsibility under FERPA is no higher or lower than ours.
That's correct. That's
and
correct.
We've signed you the agent.
And right.
Yeah.
And as
so you're responsible here to obey FERPA.
That's right. And as the LEA under the agency rights, I have the same responsibility.
Yeah,
so
same thing. That's what I mean. It's all same rule for all players.
We're sorry.
That's okay. So just for the final discussion on this, the first round of student information was released on 2/23. We're still going back and forth on the data discrepancies, but we did, and we're able to, those students who chose us or passively chose us, I'll use a different phrase, we did send them a letter by last week welcoming them, trying to get that information out to them that we're here and we're ready to support your student academically. We are forming parent co-op groups that can assist us in the community to engage these parents and engage these students, to give them factual information about the programs and the academic offerings that we will be having next year in the schools. So our student and parent engagement plan, we have enrollment events and town hall meetings that we are holding. We are establishing a grassroots channel of communication, actually, again, to get the facts out there about the offerings and the options for their students and their children. We are forming parent-student focus groups for such things as the student uniforms that we discussed. We are gathering input from the stakeholders as we move forward to institute that uniform policy, and we are continuing a broad awareness campaign. So quickly, we have made some efforts to get the information out to the parents about what the schools will look like for next year.